Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video and myself, Jonathan MS Pearce, as Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 29th of May 2025. We've got a somewhat quieter day yet again. We're going to talk about that in a short while, but here are the Ukrainian staff, general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course, and you can find them in the description linked below. Okay, 1,050 personnel lost is pretty much what it was yesterday, at the lower end of the range above 1,000, but still above 1,000. And yet we have 0 tanks and only 1 troop carrying AFV. 31 artillery systems, so that's back up to about 1.5 times the daily average. And 56 vehicles and fuel tanks is one of the lowest numbers we've seen in that category in recent times. So really low materiel loss figures. What is going on? Are the Russians just taking a breather, attacking in a couple of significant places, but maybe amassing troops to go on an offensive? Have they run out of equipment? Is it both? Are they amassing equipment to use in a focused attack? Jakub Yanovsky from Oryx has a muse about this very phenomenon. The Ukrainian claims of damaged and destroyed Russian equipment continue to be down a lot on most days. In my opinion, it's now a clear sign of a Russian policy of not using AFVs in most assaults. What isn't clear are the reasons for that policy change. Sorts of reasons discussed below. Size of the attacks, they went from 20 men to 12 to 2. Won't send an IFV with 2 men. Russian soldiers are cheaper to replace. Saving up for the coming offensive, simple as that. Infantry casualties remain at medium assault levels. In other words, some people are saying that actually they're attacking with very few people in each attack, although some of the number of attacks may be the same or even more than previous. And this is a point that Andrew Perpetua made the other day when someone was saying, look, the Russians are attacking more, but they're losing less. Are they having more successful attacks? No, they're attacking with fewer people, so they're losing fewer people. Rather than having 100 attacks with 30 people, they're having 100 attacks with 2 to 5 to 10 people. And so they're attacking more, it seems, but losing fewer people because actually, in a sense, they're attacking less, or they're attacking with fewer people. And that might then lead to not attacking with very many pieces of mechanized equipment, just small companies of people here and there. Okay, so yeah, interesting phenomenon to look at. What else do we have? A HIMARS strike wiped out a Russian military facility in Koronevo in the Kursk region. Initially claimed as a hospital, this site was a permanent base for Russian troops involved in attacks on the Sumy region. So it could be that the Ukrainians are trying to take out some of these staging positions for the Russians who are attacking into the northern territory of Sumy in Ukraine. But that looks like a significant strike. Good to see the HIMARS still being used. Now, this kind of footage is something we are seeing more and more and more. Honey, I'm home. Where's my coffee? Unique footage of the use of fiber optic FPV drones to successfully destroy the invaders' hard-to-reach equipment. The Wormbusters unit of the 414th Obrubas of the Armed Forces of the Ukrainian SSR Birds of Magyar. I knew that was going to happen. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for that. Okay, so here we have, and sorry to blast your ears, here we have another hangar full of equipment that has been targeted, been acquired as a target by the Ukrainians, and they've gone to take it out. You can see quite a few bits of equipment in here, and then, wow, that's a considerable explosion, and that's the roof of the hangar there, or barn. And eventually it turns into this, and we can see that the equipment inside is a little bit worse for wear. There you can see one below the destroyed roof. I don't know what the damage is to the other bits of equipment, but this is the sort of footage we're seeing more and more. Indeed, here's another one. Russian hangar with equipment prepared for assault, motorcycles, drone jammers and ammunition found and destroyed from the inside by fiber optic drones by the 118th TD Brigade. Is that, no, it's a different one to these. So you can see another hangar, this time at night, burning big time, equipment exploding from within, cooking off of ammunition there. So this is something that seems to be happening more and more. What else? Russian terrorists have dropped 5 guided glide bombs on private homes in the Polohi district of the Zaporizhia region. The airstrikes destroyed and damaged residential buildings. People are trapped under the rubble. Apparently, that is what Peskov considers military targets. So that's what a war translator is saying, what the Ukrainians are saying. Of course, like that Ukrainian hospital that was hit, you don't know whether these were definitely civilian houses that were hit. Although the Russians have done this in the past, happy to take out civilian targets. It could be that they were used by the military, but I don't want to play into Russian narratives. But to be fair, this happens both sides. Guided glide bombs are used with wild abandon, though, by the Russians more so than by the Ukrainians, and they are deemed to be also less accurate than the Ukrainian usage, as far as I understand. Okay, now we're going to go on to a death of someone quite significant, participant of the war against Ukraine and the first deputy mayor of the Russian city of Stavropol. 29-year-old Zar Gurtsev died from a grenade explosion. The monster led part of the strikes on Mariupol. So you've got a guy that's just about to walk up here. So I think that's Gurtsev there. Although it could be this chap, I'm not 100% sure. And this chap could be the guy with the grenade, or the grenade could come from somewhere else. There's a little bit of a lack of clarity, but I won't show you any more of that because it explodes and those two bodies fly in opposite directions. The claim is that, Nexta reports a man who carried out the Stavropol explosion lived in the same building as Gurtsev. Nikita Penkov, the man behind the Stavropol explosion that killed the butcher, Zar Gurtsev, had rented an apartment in the same building for 15 days prior. Preliminary reports suggest Penkov moved to Chekhov Street specifically to observe Gurtsev's daily routine. The improvised explosive device was hidden in Penkov's bag. It was a caseless bomb which left no debris after detonation. The device had an estimated power of about 300 grams of TNT or equivalent. So, Russian major who directed airstrikes on Mariupol was killed in an explosion. He's killed in a grenade explosion. The blast occurred when 29-year-old Penkov approached. So it looks like Penkov was a guy that approached Gurtsev. Gurtsev was a chap in the pink shirt and the white trainers. He was a deputy mayor of Stavropol. So anyway, it appears that explosion might well have been kind of a suicide bomb, or it went wrong. Who knows? But either way, this chap has died, and some people are very much in the line of thought of good riddance. He wasn't a decent human. But that looks like some kind of partisan activity taking place in Mariupol. Now, a construction market, in Stavropol. Stavropol. A construction market in Solnechnogorsk near Moscow caught fire yesterday. Another big fire taking place. This time, again, in the Moscow region, they happen quite frequently, although I haven't reported them as much of late. Explosions are heard at the scene. Some say paint cans are detonating. That's a 2,100 square meter fire. Fairly typical. Then this is potentially a fire where there's a bit more to it. People aren't quite sure how it started. This is in St. Petersburg and it's the Avant-Garde plant. Not a strike, says Max 25. So the Russian media are reporting a large fire at the Avant-Garde plant in St. Petersburg. The plant produces radio electronics and microcircuits for Russia's military-industrial complex. It took all night to put the fire out. The causes of the fire are unclear. It seems to be on the top floor of that building, which you might suggest a drone strike, but there's no evidence to support that. So strong fire engulfs the plant in St. Petersburg, said Tim White last night. Vague reports of explosions at the Avant-Garde factory before the fire took hold. The production has links to the military. Thick, dense smoke coming from the Avant-Garde plant. Residents of St. Petersburg are told to close windows. There's 2 research institutes there and production plants. They have a long history, or Avant-Garde has a long history of developing components and innovation for electronics and communications. So that is that's something that took place last night. It took all night to put out. And here we have Prince 60 talking about this. Founded in 1948, one of Russia's strategic enterprises, part of the country's electronics complex. But yeah, company develops professional electronics, automates production, and creates microsystems. It also participates in the formation of industry standards. Its products are supplied throughout Russia and exported to China and the UAE. Well, that was on fire. It's at top floor, so I don't know how extensive that is, to be honest. But looks like there's a glow coming from two areas. But anyway, hopefully that has caused an issue for that entity. Right, very little information both from Ukraine and Russian drones flying into either country. The Ukrainian air defense shot down only 10 of the 90 drones, and then 46 were suppressed by electronic warfare. So that's a success rate of 56 out of 90. That's actually pretty poor. That leaves 34. That's a full third of those drones sent into Ukraine last night were not taken out, and very few were taken out by conventional means. So I don't know what that tells us particularly. It could tell us that the Ukrainians are struggling to shoot down those drones. They're maybe flying too high. It could tell us that the Russians have developed much better flight plans for them. But anyway, no reports on any damage done, and no reports really on anything shot into Russia by Ukraine. So it could have been a very quiet night. Might not have been any drones fired in from Ukraine after a couple of particularly heavy nights, really from both sides. Russian ballistic missile strike has hit a farm in Mykolaiv region, killing 1 and injuring 3. Reports of Mykolaiv Regional Military Administration in Breslav. A drone attack killed 2 men there as well. But I guess, as sad as this is for those people who are killed and injured there, you'd rather a ballistic missile hit a farm in the middle of kind of agricultural land than hits some military industrial complex or army base or air base somewhere in Ukraine. So yeah, that happened, but really lacking in much information about activity overnight. So we're going to go on to other bits and pieces. Here we have who is this? So this is a Russian Z blogger, Maxim Kalashnikov, who went to the front line in Russia's Kursk region and interviewed a Russian officer. If you were the Russian authorities, what would you do for victory? I would stop the war altogether, said the Russian officer. So he said the war must be stopped. It makes no sense, and this mass slaughter must be stopped. Quote, in terms of defense, yes, we can still do something, but in terms of offensive, we need additional forces and reserves. I would stop the war. So this is just an anecdote, but it's interesting that you've got a Russian commander supposedly up in the Kursk region saying it's terrible, we don't have enough offensive capabilities, we need to stop the war. I don't know if that's at all universal. A Russian deserter living in Paris copied 3 gigabytes of top secret information belonging to 2 Russian divisions and shared it with Le Monde. He estimates that barely 20% of the troops on the ground were convinced by Putin's comments about the Ukrainians. Most of them secretly mock Putin, believing him to be weaker than he appears. They also claim to not really understand the objectives of the operation or why the war has lasted so long. He acknowledges that Russia is, quote, getting bogged down in a war of attrition against the Ukrainian resistance. Despite advancing just a few kilometers, the Russian troops are unable to launch any major maneuvers. On the ground, they do not foresee the great victory promised by Putin. Although they're having some success, the Russians, over to me, they're having some success around the Pokrovsk area, just Toretsk really going north towards Konstantiniev. There are rumors about, striking down into Sumy in Kharkiv, rumors about striking up into Zaporizhia, rumors about striking across from Donetsk and into Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. We yet to see these materialize in significant ways, but even if they did, you're wondering is what the maximum that Russia can achieve now. So they might have some success on the Donetsk front, but how exhausted are the Russians? We go back to the materiel problem. Have they exhausted their reserves? Well, it looks like their deep stockpiles inside Russia are at all-time lows, and things are fairly desperate. So they might be having some tactical successes in certain places, maybe even operational successes to some degree. But how long can that be sustained? And what do Ukraine have in response? I mean, do they have anything they can respond with militarily? Now, I'm starting to see quite a lot of, well, I say starting, we've at different periods through the war seen some horrific videos of the way that Russians treat their soldiers. I saw one video yesterday of 2 Russian soldiers being taped to a tree, one with a bucket on his head, getting the crap kicked out of them by their own unit, by their own officers who were refuseniks. So going back to this deserter saying, well, actually only 20% of the troops on the ground were convinced by Putin's comments, and most of them secretly mock Putin and don't really want to be doing what they're doing. But you have 20% who do, who appear to beat the crap out of those who don't want to take part. And refuseniks are given real harsh treatment. Here is one. I don't know if it's a refusenik, or sometimes it happens with if they're drinking excessively, depending on what the unit is. Here, Russians. So this guy gets kicked. I'm not going to show you the video. I will just explain it to you. This guy gets kicked around by the person on the camera, swearing at him lots, and actually he's tethered to the back of a truck, and they drag him down that track and across the field, and then back onto the track and across the field, around the field, literally dragging this poor guy behind him. And this is the way the Russians are treating their soldiers. Russians drag one of their own by the feet behind a car. Imagine what they do to Ukrainian defenders. It's only Ukraine's 110 brigades keeping this kind of stuff out of Europe. And that's an interesting point made by Jay in Kiev there. Talking about war crimes, UN confirms what Zarina Zabriskie witnessed reporting from Kherson, and I've interviewed her twice. She's doing an amazing job in reporting from Kherson. But the UN has now confirmed that Russian drone attacks on civilians are planned and organized crimes against humanity. Quote, aim a camera at the sky, sooner or later a drone will show up. The UN has now confirmed that Russia is partaking in war crimes in Kherson. Something that we've known for a long time with the work of people like Brendan Kelly and Zarina Zabriskie. Now, over 2 million leaked documents outlining the inner workings of Russia's nuclear facilities have been made public by the German press. Analyst says of this massive Russian data breach, over 2 million pages of data referring to the Russian nuclear command and control system and infrastructure have been leaked online. The detail is extraordinary, even going down to the posters and warning signs and what they mean in individual bunkers. The documents reveal a mass of locations and communications protocols. The source is not yet clear, but it represents one of the biggest security breaches of all time involving Russia. Die Spiegel revealed the documents were not stolen from a secured depository, but taken from contractors who were working on the avant-garde system and facility. They placed the documents on insecure servers, which were then accessed. It's a truly detailed and shocking reveal. It even outlines alarm. Oh, thank you, Sarah. I've got a cup of tea. This is more than you could ever ask for. It's truly detailed and shocking reveal. It even outlines alarm systems and toilet locations. Even detailed computer system and location records were included. So these are some striking revelations. I wonder how useful they will be to foreign intelligence services. Incredible stuff there. Now, on the other hand, Russian-linked hackers have targeted UK Defence Ministry while posing as journalists. There have been some fairly consistent Russian attacks on different nations in Europe that make me, and I've said this many times to you before, think that it's kind of ill-advised. The more Russia do obvious things that make themselves the enemy, the more they will unite Europe against them. So if I was Putin and trying to, it depends what your objectives are, right? But I would be trying to navigate this fine line between doing a war against Ukraine and attriting the Ukrainian defenses and achieving military objectives, whilst sowing discord and confusion amongst the the allied forces, the allied nations of Ukraine, particularly in Europe. I mean, they've successfully done that in the US, right, with Trump in charge and being completely compromised and flip-flopping all over the place and essentially being Taco Trump. Taco Trump always chickens out. That's his new nickname. And we'll come to that in a wee while. And in Europe, just consistently try and sow discord. But if you unite Europe, if you do things that are too overtly anti any given nation, maybe with cyber attacks, maybe destroying infrastructure in, burning shopping malls in Poland, then that's a step too far, and you will unite people against you because you are obviously the enemy then. So, but UK is probably a little bit different because we're fairly consistently anti-Russia. So the cyber attack was detected and thwarted, the British government said, unveiling a new cyber command tasked with managing both offensive and defensive cyber efforts. We're going to talk about that in the I can't remember if I've got that in my geopolitics video or Millet, but the UK, with its strategic defense review coming out, has unveiled new cyber offensive capabilities and whatnot, or not necessarily capabilities, but organization and structure. Now, talking about Taco Trump, you're going to see this. I try not to do too much political stuff in this video, but actually this is relevant to Trump's positioning on Russia as well. Although the context of this is in tariffs, his chickening out of putting any pressure on Russia is an overt example of this, and I think well done to this CBS reporter for saying this.
And on Russia, Mr. President.
Oh no, so sorry. This is the Russia, the 2 weeks Russia. So sorry, this is a different question. But the woman next to her, the CBS reporter there, then asked about Taco. But this is about Russia.
Do you believe the Russians are being disrespectful when they say that your criticisms of Putin are simply an emotional response? And do you still believe that Putin actually wants to end the war?
I can't tell you that, but I'll let you know in about 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks, we're going to find out very soon. We're going to find out whether or not he's tapping us along or not. And if he is, we'll respond a little bit differently. But it'll take about a week and a half, 2 weeks. We have Mr. Witkoff is here, who's doing a phenomenal job, is dealing with them very strongly right now. They seem to want to do something, but until the document is signed, I can't tell you. Nobody can.
President Zelensky,
I can say this, that I'm very disappointed at what happened a couple of nights now where people were killed in the middle of what you would call a negotiation. I'm very disappointed by that. Very, very disappointed. Yeah, please.
So he's giving Russia 2 weeks, even though he's really disappointed he's given them 2 weeks. So it's interesting that Trump refers to what a good job that Steve Witkoff is doing, because here, fascinatingly, we have interviewed by Trigonometry, not a big fan of these guys. But anyway, this is an interesting excerpt. Andrei Illarionov, a former advisor to Putin and now a critic of the Kremlin regime, attempts to explain why Steve Witkoff likes so much Russian propaganda. He argues that Witkoff is very ignorant and incompetent.
Right. So why is the U.S.
Helps if I have the...
Right. So...
Oops. Here goes.
Right. So why is the U.S. Special Envoy saying things that have no connection to the truth, but have every connection to Kremlin propaganda? Why is that happening, Andrei?
No, it's first of all the fact of unbelievable incompetence and outright ignorance of the facts on the ground. So, but because he had been appointed in this position back then, whatever, in November or December, so he had at least some time to accumulate this knowledge. But it's clear that he's not interested in that. So because it's not a very big business to have 2 clicks and to find out what is the ethnicity of Mr. Khrushchev. It's just English-speaking Wikipedia is telling it openly. It's not a rocket science. So that is why, and by the way, the question is he bragged, Mr. Witkoff bragged that he spent almost 8 hours with Putin, just to produce an impression on his English-speaking listeners. But the question is very simple. How many seconds he spent with Ukrainians? And the answer is very clear, 0. So that is why how he could be any envoy on these particular issues if he is listening to only one side, being completely ignorant in these issues, never been neither before this travel, it seems to me, never been to Russia, never been to Ukraine, understanding nothing about the story, about history, about the international relations, about security. He recognized
an absolutely stinging rebuke of Steve Witkoff from someone that should have at least some idea of what's going on. And yet we've got Trump there saying, oh, we're going to give him 2 weeks and Steve Witkoff's doing a great job. Well, he's ignorant and incompetent. And this seems to be chickening out of putting any efforts, any pressure onto the Kremlin and onto Putin. As Phillips O'Brien, here is Trump being so angry and threatening to Putin that he's resolutely deciding not to do anything more about sanctions for 2 weeks. People can be such rubes. So Phillips O'Brien, very critical of Trump's approach there. Now, here's a question that I was referencing earlier from a CBS reporter.
President, Wall Street analysts have coined a new term called the taco trade. They're saying Trump always chickens out on your tariff threats, and that's why markets are higher this week. What's your response to that?
I kick out?
Chicken out.
Oh, and then I chicken out. I've never heard that. You mean because I reduced China from 145%?
So then goes on to give examples of how he's chickened out and then said, well, that's absolute nonsense, blah, blah, blah. But then he responded on Twitter, went on Truth Social on these big rants that seem to be, I think, influenced by the idea that he's being called Taco Trump. And now the internet is alive with Taco Trump and all sorts of different claims. Robert Armstrong, the Financial Times commentator who coined the taco trade term that angered President Trump today, calls his response very telling. So Trump is then, went on, gave his response there and later online. But when it comes to Russia, I think this is really, really apropos. Trump has chickened out at every conceivable opportunity. And if you want, and I've said this before, he needs to be called weak, right? And very openly by I think, powerful people with a lot of people with a megaphone, right? It's not going to work coming from me, but being given a nickname like he gives to other people is going to be very, I think, powerful in getting him to certainly, I'm not, trade, you kind of don't want him to keep massive trade tariffs on countries, like 145%, checking out that. But, the whole nature of what he's doing with trade is just bizarre. But when it comes to Russia, I think Taco Trump, he needs to be called these nicknames that will get under his skin. I've said before that he needs to understand that people think he is weak. And when he understands that people think he's weak on Russia, he will end up having to prove them wrong by being strong on Russia. And that is the best way, I think, to get him to act against Putin's interests here. So, these kind of Taco Trump memes that are now flying about, #Taco, I think are going to be useful in annoying the crap out of Trump and getting him to realize that people are seeing him as weak. Now, Ukraine is ready for the next Istanbul talks with Russia, but demands Russia share its ceasefire memorandum beforehand. Quote, we call on them to fulfill that promise without delay and stop trying to turn the meeting into a destructive one, said, I presume, Zelensky, or no, could well be Andrei Yermak or someone. Now, I'm not quite sure what's going on with Istanbul. The analyst says pointless peace talks resume in Istanbul. Ukraine attends because it has to keep the Americans on side. Russia goes to yet again reiterate its claim to all 4 oblasts in full to remind everyone that if it doesn't get them, it will wage a war of creeping advances until it does. There is no change to Russia's approach and there are no concessions. The only thing that has held is that Ukraine has refrained from hitting Russian energy infrastructure, and I've talked about that recently, and Russia has avoided power grids and production in Ukraine. So it seems like there could be an arrangement between both of them on energy infrastructure. Both know how badly they can damage each other. So fear, and Russians' fear at Ukraine's capabilities, no mean achievement, has kept that deal in place. Instead, Ukraine goes after the infrastructure of Russian war industries, everything from munitions plants to battery manufacturing for missiles. The Russians hit civilians. The POW transfer has been a positive outcome, yet even that has shown the barbarity of Russian behavior. Rape, torture, beatings, and malnutrition are all common complaints, often with many dying in captivity. Russian brutality never stops. I'm just reading actually Pierre just sent me a claim from a different source on strikes with Garans and Shaheeds. I've been saying that we don't have too much information about what's been going on with regard to these, but actually it seems that they've been using quite close to the front lines, maybe up around the Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, Konstantinivka area. In the town of Alexandriivka, at least 6 Garans hit unknown targets. Powerful explosions were heard throughout the town, resulting in strong shockwaves. In the city of Belozerska, at least 1 Garan hit an unknown target. Strong explosions were heard throughout the city. In total, 37 Garan impacts, a new record for Donetsk Oblast. So it appears that they could be using these drones to strike much closer to the front line rather than sending them into Kiev and Lviv and Odessa and so on and so forth. They're actually using to strike near targets just behind enemy lines and in that kind of short to medium range that we see Lancets being used. Now, I almost talked about how I think Ukraine, if they're sending 300 drones into Russia, many of them getting shot down, and etc., I'd be interested to see whether it'd be worth taking 300 one-way attack drones and using them on the front line, like sending them at Russian targets close to or in that near area, just like the Russians are doing there, it seems. And I was going to talk about that, but just didn't today. But it's interesting that Pierre sent that, because that has reignited my thinking that they should start using some of these one-way attack drones much more locally inside Ukraine at Russian military targets. Now, the final thing I'll leave you with is kind of sad news, but hopefully these survivors will indeed survive in a sustained way. So storks, they're kind of the national animal of Ukraine. They come back and nest in the same place, it seems, year after year. In the Kiev region, a mother stork was killed in a Russian attack the other night while covering her 4 chicks with her wings. The chicks were taken down from the pole. Their mother was buried. Marina Kochkina, a local resident, reported. Another resident of the village, Svetlana, took in the stork chicks, and my goodness, I hope that they can be nursed to fledgling status and survive to go and live fruitful lives. It's sad enough seeing the human cost to this war, but the ecological and environmental cost of the war is staggering, absolutely staggering, and it breaks my heart. Anyway, take care, y'all, and I will speak to you soon. Toodle pips.